When police opened the door to a small apartment in Milwaukee in the summer of 1991, they believed they were responding to a routine complaint. What they discovered inside would soon shake America and leave a question that still echoes today. How could this happen, and how did it go on for so long? Tonight we revisit the Jeffrey Dahmer case. Not to sensationalize it, but to understand the facts, the failures, and the emotions that continue to surround one of the most disturbing criminal cases in U.S. history. Jeffrey Dahmer was born in 1960 and grew up in what appeared, on the surface, to be an ordinary Midwestern family. Friends and teachers later described him as quiet, withdrawn, and socially isolated. As he moved into adulthood, that isolation deepened. He struggled with alcoholism, had difficulty maintaining relationships, and drifted from job to job. None of this, however, prepared the public for what would later be revealed. The first known killing connected to Dahmer occurred in 1978, shortly after he graduated from high school. A young man named Stephen Hicks lost his life, and at the time, no one realized this was the beginning of a pattern. For years afterward, Dahmer remained largely invisible to law enforcement. He moved between states, lived with relatives, and eventually settled in Milwaukee, where his crimes escalated. Between 1987 and 1991, Dahmer targeted young men, many of them from marginalized communities. He lured victims back to his apartment with promises of money, companionship, or photography. Once inside, the situation turned deadly. Years later, Dahmer would admit to killing multiple people during this period, offering detailed accounts of his actions and his state of mind. In July 1991, everything changed. One man, Tracy Edwards, managed to escape from Dahmer's apartment and flagged down police officers. When officers returned with Edwards to the apartment, they discovered photographs that raised immediate alarm. A deeper search revealed evidence that would confirm Dahmer's confessions and end his killing spree. Dahmer was arrested on July 22, 1991. Within days, the case exploded into national headlines. The speed of the investigation, the volume of evidence, and Dahmer's own willingness to speak stunned the public. In court, Dahmer pleaded guilty but mentally ill. He was ultimately sentenced to multiple life terms in prison, ensuring he would never be released. Yet the story does not end with a verdict. Almost. Immediately, serious questions emerged about how the system had failed to stop him sooner. One of the most painful moments came to light during the investigation. Earlier in 1991, a teenage boy named Conrad Synthasamphone had escaped from Dahmer's apartment. Despite visible injuries and desperate pleas from bystanders, police officers returned the boy to Dahmer after accepting his explanation. Conrad was later killed. This incident became a symbol of institutional failure. The officers involved were later disciplined, but for many the consequences felt insufficient compared to the loss of life. The case forced Milwaukee and the nation to confront uncomfortable truths about bias, negligence, and how vulnerable people can be ignored. As the trial unfolded, Dahmer gave extensive interviews and confessions. He spoke calmly, often without visible emotion, describing his crimes in detail. For some observers, this openness reinforced the strength of the case against him. For others, it raised unsettling questions about why no audio or video recordings of key interrogations were preserved, relying instead on written notes. While this was defended as standard procedure at the time, it has remained a point of controversy. Over the years, public reactions to the Dahmer case have diverged sharply. Many focus on the victims, their lives, their families, and the enduring pain left behind. They argue that any attempt to reframe or soften Dahmer's guilt is deeply disrespectful and dangerous. For them, the evidence, confessions, and verdict leave no room for doubt. At the same time, a smaller but persistent group questions the official narrative. They scrutinize timelines, evidence handling, and media coverage, expressing distrust toward institutions. Some go as far as to claim the case was exaggerated or manipulated. These claims, however, have not been supported by verified evidence capable of overturning the convictions. Courts have consistently upheld the original findings. What is undeniable is the role media played in shaping public perception. From the earliest days after the arrest, the case was everywhere. Images, headlines, and later dramatizations etched Dahmer's face into public memory. This intense focus raised ethical concerns. Did constant exposure educate the public, or did it risk turning tragedy into spectacle? Another unresolved question lies in how society remembers such cases. More than 30 years later, debates continue over memorials, accountability, and whether enough has been done to honor the victims. For families, closure is not a legal term. It is a long and painful process, often made harder by ongoing public arguments. In prison, Dahmer became a controversial figure once again. He reportedly turned to religion and expressed remorse, though reactions to this were mixed. Some saw it as sincere, others viewed it with skepticism. In 1994, Dahmer was killed by another inmate, bringing his life to an abrupt end but not ending the discussion around his crimes. The Dahmer case now stands as more than a record of violence. It is a case study in systemic failure, media responsibility, and public trust. It challenges us to ask how warning signs were missed, how institutions respond to marginalized victims, and how society talks about extreme evil without losing its moral compass. As we look back, one truth remains clear. The suffering was real, and the consequences irreversible. Questioning systems is necessary in any healthy society, but it must be done with care, evidence, and respect for those who were harmed. When facts become blurred by emotion or distrust, the risk is not just misunderstanding the past, but repeating its mistakes. So tonight, as we revisit this case, we leave you with a question worth considering. How do we balance the need for truth and accountability with the responsibility to protect victims' dignity and public trust? What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can uncover more stories together. This content is compiled and analyzed based on publicly available information and open discussions.